A Christmas Eve showdown between the Panthers and Lions. Both teams trying to keep their NFC playoff hopes alive. It's yet another Locked On NFL crossover edition here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast and the Locked On Lions podcast. Julian Council, host of Locked On Panthers. He is Matt Dery, the host of Locked On Lions. We'll be breaking down the Week 16 matchup between the Carolina Panthers and the Detroit Lions, who both are right in the thick of the playoff picture in the NFC. The Panthers trying to contend for the NFC South Division title, while the Lions are trying to be wild card winners there in the NFC. This edition of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is so much fun, and it's easy to play. No competing with other players. It's just you versus the projections available. Pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you win up to 10 times your money on your entry. It can take literally less than 60 seconds to enter. It's that easy. We love Prize Picks, and we know that you will too. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Matt, I don't know how you feel, but I certainly did not think on Christmas Eve the Carolina Panthers would be in the playoff picture. I knew the NFC South was likely not going to be great, but this team that fired Matt Rule at 1-4 with after Week 5 did not see them in a position where if they win their last 3 games, they could be in the playoffs. And I certainly from this end did not see the Detroit Lions in the playoff picture as a wildcard team. Are you as surprised as me about what we got going on Saturday afternoon between the Panthers and Lions?
I really do, Julian. I'm a little surprised myself. I didn't think this game would have any kind of meaning as we got to Christmas Day, but here we are. The NFC South is a complete embarrassment. I can't even believe that you guys are in this thing. I mean, I watched a lot of your game this Sunday to kind of get ready. I had one eye on it, and it's not a good football team. I don't want to. The Panther listeners probably going, "Who's this smug guy from Detroit?" The Lions are actually decent. Like, this is crazy to me. But the Panthers, I mean, it is a very weird kind of setup here. But your guys are right there because Tampa's no good. And obviously New Orleans and Atlanta are what they are. But I'd be very interested in seeing how the Lions play because they're going to be road favorites first time in who knows how long. And I know this past week they were bumped up to like a point and a half favorite, but that's only because Mike White was hurt.
Right.
But Detroit is hot, and they're the talk of the league right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, too. You talk about the Panthers. They're not a good team. I don't disagree with you. The last 2 weeks prior to the game leading up to Pittsburgh, they had played good football by being able to run the football well, and they have a solid defense. Just overall, they don't have the quarterback play that you would desire, especially if you're going to be a playoff contender. And a lot of people have tried to compare this season back to 2014 when the Panthers were 7-8-1 and won a weak NFC South back then. Now, what's different is this team does not have Cam Newton. This team does not have Luke Kuechly. This team does not have Greg Olsen or Thomas Davis and a lot of those stalwarts that helped the Panthers get to 15-1 in 2015. This roster is young and is still trying to learn how to win. So we'll see how they handle it this week after a week where there was expectations and they fell flat on their face against a bad Pittsburgh Steelers team. But as far as the biggest storylines going to this game, what's the biggest storyline as far as the Lions perspective headed to Saturday afternoon's game against the Panthers?
Like I said, Julian, they're America's team. I mean, everybody's all over them. I mean, the Lions are the talk of the league. They're the toast of the town. People in Detroit are talking playoffs and saying they should do it. And it's like, wait, what? They were 1-6. We wanted to run Dan Campbell out of town, Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, out of town. I couldn't believe they traded TJ Hawkinson in the division. And all of a sudden they've won 6 of 7. And really the storyline is they're hot, playing great complementary football. Special teams has been good. Defense has been good, much better. And the offense is, even though they only put up 20 against the Jets on Sunday, it's an efficient offense. They run, they throw. Goff hasn't been touched in weeks. The O-line's been unbelievable. And so people really in Detroit for the first time in a long time are going, road game at Carolina, no problem. Who's next? And still going to be a tough game. Like you said, your defense, I mean, I'm a huge Brian Burns fan. I love Jeremy Chin. That's Jim Nagy, my boy from Senior Bowl. Loved him years ago and told me about them. But this is not going to be some walkover or cakewalk, I don't think. But at least the storyline here is that people are excited. What about down there?
Yeah, and that's a good point you bring up about the Panthers defense. Now, I think the Lions, I watched a lot of that Jets game as well. The Jets have a better defense than the Panthers have. And what they gave up, the punt return, which that's the second time this year the Jets have given up a punt return for a touchdown. And then later on, they give that complete bust there on that 4th down and 1. But other than that, it's not like the Lions offense was going up and down the field on them. The Panthers certainly need to be up to the task against what's been a really explosive unit. But as far as top storyline here, despite the Panthers losing to Pittsburgh and being 5-9, they still have a chance to be a playoff team if they win their final 3 games of the season. This was the same conversation last week. If the Panthers would have won their final 4 games against Pittsburgh, then against Detroit, then at Tampa and at New Orleans, they would be 9-8 in division champions. Now they can be 8-9 in division champions. So it's really trying to get back to that physicality that they had shown in their wins against Denver and on the road against Seattle. It was the first time they had won back-to-back games since week 2 and week 3 of the 2021 season, and the first time they had won on the road since November of 21 when they beat the Arizona Cardinals, who didn't have Kyler Murray that afternoon. That was the game actually Cam Newton made his return to Carolina, had his 2 touchdowns on his first 2 touches. So it's really trying to get back to establishing the run, because when they had done that in their previous wins, I mean, they've averaged 202 yards on the ground rushing in their wins, and in their losses it's been far less, but they've still had success. It was just startling to see the Panthers only run for 21 yards on 1.3 yards per carry against a Pittsburgh Steelers team that had give up 230 yards rushing the week prior to the Baltimore Ravens that had really nothing to play for other than pride and trying to preserve Mike Tomlin's streak of never having a losing season there in Pittsburgh, and they've at least helped them do that. We'll see how the Steelers go the rest of the way, but yeah, the Panthers are trying to find a way to protect the bank, as Steve Wilkes called it. They didn't do it last week. The bank was also filled with a bunch of Steelers fans, which is very common here in Charlotte and a lot of places across the league, but especially in this town where the fan base has been out on this team, and we've seen multiple takeovers over the last few years. And Matt Rule's been the head coach. Of course, now he's gone. So they're trying to bounce back, find a way to win, and be right there in the thick of the playoff picture, which is surprising to say considering they showed a lot of signs of not really being interested in being a playoff team when they got beat by Pittsburgh on Sunday. But we'll continue the well, go ahead.
Real fast. I just want to say I noticed that with a lot on I think it was the Najee Harris touchdown. My goodness. I mean, the amount of Steeler fans was nuts. I'm assuming there'll be a good chunk of Lion fans down there this Sunday. So,
yeah. Well, how many Lions fans live in the area? Because I don't run into very many Lions fans.
No, but they'll travel. Now that this team, a little warm, what's the temperature going to be Sunday?
They're apparently it's going to be like in the 30s. They're talking about it's going to be a colder Panther home game, so it's not going to be warm.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'd still say there will be some Lion fans that will travel for sure over the holiday. So
now I wouldn't be surprised by that after seeing a bunch of Vikings fans last year. That was not a franchise I thought would take over the stadium here in Charlotte. So hopefully those days will change, that the Panthers can get back to winning some games, as they are now set up for their 5th straight losing season. But we'll take a quick pause here, Matt, then come back, talk about some of these key matchups in this Panthers-Lions game. It's yet another Locked On NFL crossover Thursday, brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. But this episode of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Lions is also brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find an episode from the league available as a bonus episode on Locked On NFL, narrated by Super Bowl champion and legendary smack talker Richard Sherman and sports broadcaster and rising star Taylor Rooks. The League is an 8-part docuseries about the most bizarre, inspirational, and unlikely stories connected to America's favorite sport, pro football. You won't want to miss these untold stories spanning from the 1940s through the present. Our bonus episode is called The Way of the Cowboy, and it's an incredible story of the 1977 Dallas Cowboys and how they brought Bruce Lee's protege to teach their defense martial arts, ushering in a new approach to the way the league is trained. Each story offers equal parts history, entertainment, and social commentary. Head over to the Locked On NFL feed for a bonus episode of The League, or catch the full series wherever you get your podcast, available right now. Audible, get in the game. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Lions. It's the Locked On NFL crossover Thursday, sponsored by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com or download the PrizePicks app and enter promo code Locked On. Julian Council, host of Locked On Panthers. Matt Dery, he's the host of Locked On Lions. 7-7 Lions facing off against the Carolina Panthers, who were sitting at 5-9, but still with a chance to win the NFC South if they went out on Sunday afternoon, Christmas Eve at Saturday afternoon, Christmas Eve at Bank of America Stadium. Matt, let's look at some of these key matchups heading to this game from the Detroit Lions perspective? What are some of the matchups that you're looking forward to seeing from a positive standpoint, and also ones that you might be a little bit worried about from a negative standpoint as it pertains to the Lions?
Well, obviously, it looked like from what took place on Sunday that the Steelers had some success running the football. It wasn't a great success, and it's not a great running team and not a great offensive line in Pittsburgh. But I think the Lions want to get back to the ground game and having some success. They have not run the football all that well. Even yesterday, there were some better performances, or I should say Sunday, better performances against the Jets, but not the best. And I know the Panthers D line has kind of been the strength of their defense for years. So we'll have to see about that. I also am interested in watching Brian Burns at 10.5 sacks going up against Penei Sewell and Taylor Decker. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I spent Monday's podcast talking about just how dominant this Lions offensive line has been, led by their tackles. I mean, Frank Ragnow's a Pro Bowl center, but Decker on the left, Sewell on the right. Those guys have been nasty. And I've always been, like I said before, a Burns fan. I know we didn't have a big game Sunday against Pittsburgh, but 10.5 sacks is still nothing to sneeze about on a bad team. And I'm interested in seeing if Jared Goff finally goes down. It's been weeks since he's been sacked, at least consistently. This past week, 0. I believe 2 weeks before that, 0. So the O-line's doing a great job protecting. Can the Panthers get in there and force Goff to make a bad throw and an interception? Goff hasn't turned the ball over in weeks. It's been about 215 snaps plus. So we'll see where this thing goes. 215 minutes, I should say. We'll see how this thing goes and where it goes. But I want to watch Carolina's front against the Lions offensive line this weekend.
Yeah, I'm also watching that as well after the Panthers just got manhandled, honestly, by the Steelers offensive line throughout that game, giving up 157 yards rushing. And they went into last week better against the run, as they were able to even contain Baltimore even in that loss, and did a great job against the Falcons in that Thursday Night Football win after really getting gashed by them a couple weeks prior in their loss in overtime at Atlanta. And they had kind of they've stepped up and played better against the run. So it was surprising to see them get pushed around the way that they did on Sunday afternoon. Like Brian Burns, as you mentioned, he's been terrific here. 10.5 sacks this year. He's had that knee issue the last couple of weeks. It's kind of slowed him down. He did get a pressure, but Frankie Louvu, who's one of their other linebackers that's been actually tremendous this season, he cleaned it up and got a sack there. But they got to get pressure. And I know Quinnen Williams didn't play for the Jets on Sunday, so maybe that had some sort of factor. But the Jets got a good defensive line, and they've gotten after everybody throughout this season. For them not to touch Jared Goff, that does concern me, as the Panthers, outside of Burns, really haven't had the best pass rush this season. Like Louvu has 6 sacks. Most of those have come over the last 4 weeks. Marquise Haynes has been a pass rush specialist, and kind of like Bryce Huff there with the Jets. He's had a couple sacks the last couple weeks after having a bit of fat goose egg in the first about 11 weeks of the season. So they got to get pressure on Jared Goff, who, if he sits back there, the guy's got talent. He can make the plays. He might not make all the throws that you want him to make and be as consistent and as accurate, but he's had a great season so far for the Lions. And I imagine he's been a big part of that team and that offense really stepping forward. And when I look at some of the playmakers on that offense, like Khalif Raymond, who had the punt return on Sunday in that win against the Jets, and he also was pretty good also in the pass game, but also Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's been really good. And the Panthers secondary has been banged up with injuries. J.C. Horn, he's been tremendous. But I imagine he'll be on St. Brown. But Raymond's the one who concerns me, because guys like C.J. Henderson, who even when healthy has struggled, but Keith Taylor, he got diced up all Sunday afternoon trying to defend Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. The other corner that's on Raymond has to really step up, because if they don't, that could be a big day for Khalif Raymond. And even maybe St. Brown, if he gets in a matchup that's favorable for him and that Lions offense, which the Panthers got to be able to slow down. So I'm certainly looking at the offensive line, the secondary, and the Panthers O-line's got to step up as well.
I want to correct something. Jared Goff's thrown 219 straight passes without an interception, which is the longest of his career, which is interesting. And watch Jamison Williams too. I know you're an SEC guy, Julian. Obviously, he was so dominant at Alabama. Really hasn't been able to get going yet. He's only played a couple of games, but maybe this is the week they get J-Mo behind the defense and try to throw a deep ball. It's tough to do in New Jersey in that swirling wind at the Meadowlands. And then the week before was kind of his first game. But it's been now, 3 games that Williams has played. But they got him for 1 touchdown a couple of weeks ago. But can they kind of get him more involved this week? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I guess this would probably be the game you would expect. He's got a couple games under his belt now, coming back into secondary. That again, missing Dante Jackson out for the rest of the season. We'll see what the status is for the Panthers corner, CJ Henderson, come Saturday. But this might be the opportunity for him to really step up and be able to make some plays. Now, as far as the Lions defense, I know they struggled early on in the season. What kind of strides have they made over the last couple of weeks as they've been able to win 6 of 7?
Starts with the firing of secondary coach Aubrey Pleasant, and it's really a bad thing to say because he's an individual and a person and a good guy, and immediately got a job with the Packers. But some switch was flipped, because ever since he's been let go, the Lions defense has been a whole lot better. It's been a lot of the basics, blocking and tackling. They're moving people against the run. They're filling lanes, which at the start of the year they were getting gashed. D-line has gotten a lot better. Aiden Hutchinson's up for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Watch a kid named Isaiah Buggs in the middle has done well. Romeo Quara is now healthy. Linebacker play is better. Alex Anzalone has stepped up. So, and that's an NFC South guy back in the Saints days. So they've just been clicking a little bit better, not blitzing as much. Aaron Glenn had them very aggressive at the start of the year, almost over blitzing. And now they're cutting back a little bit, and they're just making some plays. And they've got players that have improved and have played well. I'm interested in seeing, Hubbard out of the backfield if he can get free, because that's sometimes where the Lions are a little bit weak is covering those tight ends or even the running backs out of the backfield in the passing game.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if Okwara has a big game. He is from Charlotte, went to Archer Kell High School, so imagine he'll have a lot of family there and be supporting him on Saturday afternoon. And yeah, as far as running backs go, not a lot of great pass catching backs here on this Panthers roster. Hubbard has struggled catching the football at times and really is hanging on to it. And it's really been Deontay Foreman who's been like the bell cow, but he has not been healthy the last couple of weeks with a foot injury, only 31 carries, 84 yards. So not great for him after what we've seen from him in a lot of the Panthers wins against the Falcons early on this season, against Tampa as well, and against the Broncos prior to the bye. So the Panthers run game is going to have to step up, because I feel like the Lions going to want to sell out and force Sam Darnold to beat them. And Darnold played well on Sunday afternoon, but we saw just not good enough for him to single-handedly go out there and beat Pittsburgh. And the Panthers offensive line as well that had been playing well, gave up 4 sacks on the day. A lot of those were just the guys getting beat. And we had not really seen that from guys like Bradley Bozeman at center and the rookie Ike Ekwonu, who now in back-to-back weeks has given up a sack. He's been really solid for the Panthers at left tackle all year long. So we'll see how that pans out later on this Saturday as the Panthers and Lions face off here in Charlotte at Bank of America Stadium. Again, it's a Locked On NFL crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers with me, Julian Council, and Matt Dery of Locked On Lions, sponsored by Prize Picks. We'll come back, look at the line, and break down more of this out of the game on Sunday or Saturday, and maybe even give it some predictions of what we think will happen on Saturday afternoon between the Panthers and Lions. But before we do that, today's episode of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Lions is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to the college bowl season to basketball, they've got you all covered at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts like Locked On Panthers and Locked On Lions, you can even get those as well at BetOnline. They're the fastest and the easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in the states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, even your parents can tell. Everyone can tell. So what makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI, paid for by the NHTSA. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Lions. It's a Locked On NFL crossover Thursday, sponsored by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com or download the Prize Picks app over to the Apple App Store or Google Play Store and enter promo code Locked On. Julian Council, host of Locked On Panthers. Matt Dery, the host of Locked On Lions. Matt, looking at BetOnline, the line opened up on Sunday with the Detroit Lions as favorites at 3-point road favorites. And the Panthers, actually probably a good thing for them, as Panthers have lost 9 straight games as the favorites, whether they've been at home or on the road. Were you surprised at all by that line? It sounds right, considering Detroit just won at New York.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions have won 6 of 7, and like I said, they're hot and playing really well. There's been so much talk about the NFC South and all the bad teams and how poorly they've played. And got to give Steve Wilkes credit. The guy seemed to be playing hard for him, and he's trying to probably push to get the job. But there's just not a lot of talent there. And like you said, at quarterback, I think the Lions can get to Sam Darnold and rattle him a bit. So that did not surprise me at all, Julian. I'm sure you're with me on this. I'm going to take the Lions to win. I just think they're rolling right now. And I think that they're on a mission and playing really, really good football. And this is an offense, certainly with Carolina, that, DJ Moore's pretty good. You could tell me more about that. But I think that I think the Lions will win. I like the way they're playing right now.
I expect this team to play a lot better on Saturday than they played against Pittsburgh on Sunday, just because they've found a way to bounce back. And really, when people are down on them, that's when they play their best. And when the people are high on them, like last week, that's when they play their worst. So I expect this young team to come out firing and ready to go on Saturday afternoon. Now, the unfortunate thing is the Lions have been really good, as we've mentioned here on this podcast, and anyone who's been paying attention, because even the lone loss that they had was against Buffalo, where if they try to actually win the game, opposed to playing for a field goal or
whatever for the tie, yes.
Yeah, whatever Dan Campbell was trying to do there, because they absolutely deserved to lose that game after that, because I was sitting there yelling at my TV, just absolutely frustrated by their unwillingness to try and win the football game. But aside from that, like, that's a game Detroit absolutely could have won. And they were more than competitive against Buffalo, who right now sits atop of the AFC. So Detroit looks like the team that should be favored. And last week when I was talking to my listeners, looking at the final 4 games, I was telling them that the Panthers at worst can go 3-1 and be able to be division champions, as long as they win their final 2 games, both against divisional opponents, the most important one at Tampa next week, and then at New Orleans. If you do that, and then you split with Detroit or Pittsburgh, then you're fine. Now, what I didn't expect to happen, though, was losing to Pittsburgh, who by far, when you just look at point differential, was the worst team left on the Panthers' schedule in the final 4 weeks of the season. The Lions game is the game I thought that they were probably going to lose, because Detroit's played well. And after seeing how Detroit won that game on Sunday against the Jets, while it might not have been the most beautiful thing offensively, they got it done defensively as well. And they might have given up 300 yards passing to Zach Wilson, but when they needed to make plays, they made them. Got the interception, which was just another garbage throw from Zach Wilson, but they were able to make the plays on special teams. So, like, they are a team that is really hot right now, like you mentioned. So for me, it's hard to pick the Panthers to win this game, because, I mean, the Lions, they seem like the team that absolutely should be favored. And I think Carolina can make it a 4-quarter game, as they typically have, but it's hard to be confident about this team after the way they played last week against Pittsburgh, especially knowing it's still a young team. First time really playing meaningful games in December, even at 5-9. Hard to really buy into them. But hey, it's funny too, because it's like they're playing the Lions, and from our perspective, you're like, okay, yeah, you should beat the Lions, but the Lions are good.
This is a different Detroit team, and they just seem to find a way. And all these games come down to the end. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, I think the Lions are going to blow them out and win 31-14. I don't see that. But I do see kind of a 27-20. Maybe the Lions do make a few mistakes on the road, giving Carolina opportunities. I mean, the Lions are due to turn the ball over. It's just how it goes in this league. They've been a +9 their last 7 weeks. One of the reasons why they're 6-1. With that being said, though, I don't see them losing to Carolina. I just think that they've been so sound. They've been really good. If they get to Darnold, that is a sitting target there. Wilson on occasion this week got away, including on that 4th and 18 at the end of the game. I don't think Darnold can do that. So, I would say about 27-20 Lions. What do you think?
Yeah. I don't necessarily have a score. I do think the Lions probably cover. I don't know. I don't really see Carolina scoring like 24 points. So they're just not a high octane offense. I could see 21-17 maybe. It's a 1 possession game either way. I do see Detroit winning it. And yeah, Darnold, he's pretty athletic. but he didn't have much escapability in the pocket on Sunday when he was sacked 4 times. Some of it's also him holding onto the football a little bit too long, which has been one of his big bugaboos. And the coaching staff has also asked him, hey, you have an opportunity to run the ball sometimes. Maybe don't try and throw it 30 yards down the field and try and thread the needle. Just go out there and get the first down. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays. But yeah, I think the Lions will win this game. But I mean, just big picture though. So I mean, you talked about it. That was a 1-6 football team. You guys wanted Dan Campbell out of Detroit. I look at it. I mean, Detroit probably has a really good chance to be 10-7. If they're 10-7, they're going to be a playoff team. Just, I mean, what would it mean for the Lions franchise to be able to win on Saturday, but then to carry forward and win 2 more games and be a playoff team?
This city would go ballistic, Julian. This would be amazing. I mean, this never happens here. You know, Monday I was talking about the Colts gag job last week. That used to be what the Lions used to do. The Patriots throwing the ball backwards. Like, that's what the Lions used to do. That was Lions stuff. And now the Lions are the team making plays at the end of the game. Watching Jets coach Robert Saleh screw up his timeouts. Earlier in the year when DJ Moore in your game with Atlanta took his helmet off. That, you know, and I listened to your show that week, and I want to hear your reaction to it. I mean, that you know, cost them the game. That's the kind of stuff that used to happen here. And it doesn't happen anymore. And so people are just so excited, and it's cool. I mean, it really is. Do I think they're going to do it? I don't know. I mean, I think that they'll stub their toe. I think it's going to be tough. But if they somehow pulled this off and made the playoffs in year 2 of a rebuild when they won 3 games last year, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, well, right now we're sitting probably in the worst 5-year stretch for the Carolina Panthers. It could be saved if they're able to win the final 3. But as I just mentioned, I don't see them winning on Saturday. So that, I believe, unlikely to be the case. They could prove me wrong, but it's the hope that kills you. And as soon as you start feeling hope, that's when the worst things happen. I'm sure as a Lions fan, you have far more history, especially recently, of feeling that. The Panthers did have those years where they went to the playoffs 4 or 5 years when they had Cam Newton. Things were great, but you can see very quickly how things can all fall apart. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, for Steve Wilkes, if he can win this game and win the division, I think it's very difficult for David Tepper, the owner here, not to hire him as a full-time head coach. You could even say if they're 6-6 under him and 7-10 overall, he still deserves a job, considering that he's had multiple staffers leave, whether he fired them or they went to go follow Matt Rule at Nebraska. They traded Christian McCaffrey, and the run game immediately got better. He was able to establish an identity offensively and defensively, something that Matt Rule couldn't do in his 38 games as the head coach. Special teams-wise, they've also been good, and he doesn't have a quarterback. You know, Sam Darnold's been fine the last 3 weeks, but Baker was terrible when he was here. I was happy to see him have success with the Rams on that Thursday night football game, and you know, PJ Walker, he had his moments, but he hasn't had a quarterback. He's been short-staffed, and it's a young football team. So would love to see it happen for Steve Wilkes. That would be the importance, at least for the Panthers, winning this game. Of course, staying alive and setting a monster matchup in Week 17 at Tampa Bay. Just don't think they're quite there yet, and they kind of showed us that. No, they didn't kind of. They definitely showed it. Well, let's not say that. Let me not talk in absolutes, but they sort of showed us that on Sunday by not beating the Pittsburgh Steelers. So should be a fun game either way. I think it's going to be a game that's going to have a lot of stakes, but a lot of pressure there. Pressure there potentially late.
All right, Julian, appreciate it, my man.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to wrap up this edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Lions. Me, Julian Council, and him, Matt Dery of Locked On Lions, and Locked On NFL Crossover Edition. Sponsored again by our friends over at PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com or download the PrizePicks app and enter promo code Locked On. Check us out over on Locked On Panthers YouTube and Locked On Lions YouTube. Also check out the Locked On NFL YouTube page as well. And you can check us out wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. We'll talk to y'all on Friday, and can't wait for Saturday's matchup on Christmas Eve. So happy holidays, and we'll talk to you all then.